welcome to our final session in this room. So this is titled Data Governance, a Data Scientist's Best Friend. I know it's my best friend, so woohoo! So Deep Litter is going to be taking this for us. He's from Cervello, and he is a data governance specialist there, and he works for Cervello, which is a data and digital consultancy. He has worked with organizations across industries and internationally to successfully deliver data governance programs that focus on people and business value. So let's welcome Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Joy. Thank you for saying that when we had a conversation before that you enjoy data governance, because that's actually quite an unusual response. I don't usually get that, so I appreciate that. And I thank you all for joining as well. I realise it's 4 p.m. end of a long day, last session, so thanks for making the time and joining me for this session. I'd like to talk about data governance, and I'd like to start with a story of a data scientist. So they started a new job at what the recruiter tells them is an exciting company. The recruiter shares that they're using the latest AI technologies, that this company is really driven by data science. The data scientist dreams of uncovering hidden patterns and trends, valuable insights, and having a huge impact on humanity. They just can't wait to get started. However, they are soon confronted by a harsh reality. Most of their days are actually consumed by the task of hunting down scattered data sets and cleaning it. They spend hours sifting through messy spreadsheets, wrangling inconsistent formats, and filling in missing values. Days turn into weeks. One day, after grappling with another messy data set, they look at themselves in the mirror and realize they just can't do this anymore. They don't want to waste their precious time and talent on data cleaning. They believe that their true potential lies in making sense of data, not in endlessly wrangling it. So the next day, they hand in their notice. And at the pub later, they explain, this organization can't tell me what data we've got. When I do find it, I can't get access to it. And when I get access to it, it's rubbish. Some of this might resonate with you. And some of the conversations I've had today suggest that it's a common problem that data scientists experience, that they're spending more time trying to understand and find data than actually doing data science. They're not actually finding themselves doing what it is that they signed up for. And that's why I think data governance can be a data scientist's best friend, because a data governance can put in the structures and frameworks to support data scientists with some of these efforts. So, to introduce myself, my name's Deep Litter. I've been working with data for over 10 years. Now I work with organizations to develop strong data governance practices so that they can deliver value from their data. And in today's session, I'd like to cover and touch on 4 areas. So I'd like to start with what is data governance. Then I'd like to talk about why do data scientists need data governance, and I touched on a bit of that. Then how do we actually operate this? How can we implement this in practice? How does it operate? And then what can you do next? And I'll try and leave some time at the end for questions as well that you might have. So if there's anything that you think that you'd like to ask, then we can discuss that at the end. So let's start with what is data governance. So I think about data governance, I think it's all about trust, trying to get trusted data into the hands of people across the organization. So I like to define it as a framework of responsibilities, processes, and technology to govern data so that data can be trusted to deliver value for your people. And those people are your users, your employees, and your customers. And I find thinking about data governance in the terms of trust has been much more resonant than using the terms of governance in my conversations with people in different organizations. I think governance can sometimes have a bit of a reputation for being bureaucratic, for putting in red tape, and generally trying to stop the fun, which is a bit of a shame, because I don't think it's like that at all. I mean, I like to draw the analogy with a car. So if I think about a car, a fast car, let's say data science is focusing on speed, innovation, and trying to quickly derive insights from data. But would we want to drive in a car without any brakes? Would we be able to drive quickly without any brakes? Actually, although brakes do stop us, they also enable us to drive quickly, safely. And so I like to see data governance as these kind of safety features that actually enable our organization. They enable us to take risks, they enable us to innovate, and they enable us to do the work we want to do without exposing ourselves and our organization to unnecessary risk. So we can focus on speed and innovation, but data governance I see as prioritizing kind of safety, security, and responsible use of data. So I think this can be a very productive relationship and a great collaboration. Because together we can, while data science is driving innovation, I think data governance can work with data scientists to ensure that that innovation is grounded in responsible data practices, mitigating risks, and maintaining data trust and security. So I think it can be a highly collaborative relationship. And I mean, I've worked with some organizations where actually the data science teams are highly siloed or highly separated from data governance, or they don't even, sometimes the data science teams aren't aware of some of the data governance work that's going on, which I think is a great shame, because I think there's a huge potential here for the two teams to collaborate and work together in a kind of symbiotic relationship. And that's something I'll talk about, because I think data governance can do a lot for data science and the data science teams, and vice versa. I think data science teams can bring a lot of value to data governance and trusted data and practices in organizations as well. So that's what is data governance. So then I wanted to touch on, why do data scientists need data governance? So these are kind of some of the frustrations that I've heard from data scientists and data science teams, some of the challenges that they're facing that I feel can be addressed and supported by data governance function. So you may not know what data exists in your organization. That's surprisingly common. I've worked with organizations that don't have an inventory of their data estate and the data that they have which could potentially be used to drive huge value for the organization. I can't get access to the data sets I need. That's surprisingly common, that actually sometimes people can find the data set they need, but then they're unable to find either the person who has the context around it. Often they've already left, leaving with all of their information and the contextual knowledge they have of the data, or it's on someone's local drive as an Excel and they just can't get access to that without knowing that person, which is tricky when you have large organizations. So once you scale beyond a certain size, I think data governance becomes really critical. And that's something I'll touch on later as well, that I think data governance can really support scaling and sustainability in organizations. So I touched on not understanding. Another one which I touched on briefly was around risk. So especially when we're looking to use raw data sets that haven't been curated, then there's a potential of violations of regulations and also violations of data privacy rules. There may be inconsistencies that lead to errors in analyses, but generally the main thing is that we can't trust the data we're working with, and we can't trust that we can use it to have the impact and outcomes that we want. So how can data governance help with that? So what I've done is I've tried to categorize some of these challenges into kind of 5 broad areas where I feel data governance can support and address some of these challenges that data scientists and data science teams are facing. And I'll go through each in turn and how data governance can assist. So data discovery. So how enabling you to easily locate and access relevant data sets, which is saving time for you to search for, saving time that you would otherwise waste searching for data, so you have more time to search in data for insights. And with data discovery, I think the most foundational step is just having an inventory of the data assets that are in the estate. So that could look like a data catalog. But even for some teams and organizations, even just having an inventory of assets in an Excel spreadsheet would bring huge value. So I find some teams sometimes think they go kind of, they accelerate to investment in a tool. The issue with that sometimes is that if you invest in a tool, it can be quite difficult to demonstrate value from that quickly, and then often the investment can just get pulled. So I think actually if you can start small with even just a standard inventory in a spreadsheet, or at least some sort of centralized inventory of data assets with definitions, that brings huge value, and it's very simple. That enables you as data scientists to find out what actually exists in the organization. And once you know what exists, then you're able to work on getting access. So in terms of access in data discovery, data governance can assist with putting in robust kind of and formal access procedures so that you're able to raise access requests. Anybody in an organization can raise an access request, which can then be reviewed, prioritized, and then actioned on, rather than it just being that you need to know who has the data, which is impossible in some of these large organizations, especially if you've just joined and you don't know anyone in this organization. I think if you can work, if you're having difficulty and there is a data governance team, then that team can assist you in finding what data exists and then also how it is that you go about getting access to that data set. So I think it becomes certainly critical once organizations scale past a certain size. And I mentioned a data catalog there, so that's a tool that can assist with this, essentially an inventorying tool that provides a view of the data assets, so data sources, and then details of schemas, tables, columns, and exposes metadata of those assets, so things like descriptions, data owners, data stewards. They're hugely powerful tools, I think, and really a foundational data governance tool that can really drive it can really drive collaboration and data democratization for organizations. Data understanding. So ensures data is well documented with metadata and clear definitions. So I touched a bit on that in the data catalog. Making it easier to understand, including data lineage, and facilitates collaboration and data democratization by a shared understanding of data. So a common thing when I'm working with organizations is actually just they don't have a consistent usage of terms, or different teams will refer to different columns and data sets by different names, which actually just adds friction into collaboration. Sales is a common one. Different teams will refer to their sales figures or even have different definitions for what a sale means, which means that when we pull these data assets together and run analyses on them, that actually our outcomes can be flawed because we're not actually comparing apples with apples. We're comparing two different definitions and two different data assets. So data governance can assist in working to consistent definitions for teams. So bringing together teams to document definitions and where appropriate to align with those definitions. Because it's sometimes not enough just that everyone, or it's not necessary that everyone just goes to the same definition. Sometimes that's not practical or it doesn't make sense. But at least making that transparent that there are different definitions and what the data asset might mean. Data lineage is like a family tree. Many of you are pretty familiar with some of this, but data lineage is almost like a family tree for the data and showing you what its source is, the transformations that it's been through, and it's certainly very helpful in data science in providing the context around what are the transformations and changes that a data has been through. Where has it come from? And that certainly helps with things like transparency for models to understand which data sets the inputs are coming from and what's happened to them. And data democratization, if everyone can get on the same page with understanding data assets, then it assists collaboration between teams across organizations. Data quality is a very common one. So I'm often, when I'm talking to data science teams, one of the most common things they're saying is that they just can't trust the data they're looking at. They don't know whether the data set they're looking at is accurate. It's filled with missing values, and they're spending a lot of time trying to clean data sets rather than actually being able to run their insights and analyses on it. So putting in place a robust data quality framework can really help, and data governance teams can assist with that. We can put in things like automated data quality controls, working to develop data quality rules, and then providing transparency into how much different data assets can be trusted. So that can ensure that when you have a data set, you know how much it can be trusted or what the level of trust might be, and that you can trust the values and that they're accurate without it being necessary for you have to investigate or to clean it and validate the data. Sorry, excuse me. So data security I touched on briefly before, and this is one around enabling you to do work without exposing yourself to risk. So one of the areas I find is when we don't have appropriate data security controls in place, sometimes I think it's quite unfair on our analytics team that essentially they can expose themselves and the organization to quite a bit of risk because they're using data sets that actually they shouldn't, or perhaps they're using it for purposes that consent hasn't been granted. And that can actually expose the organization to huge level of risk. For example, especially if it's a violation of things like GDPR regulations. So you may have heard last year, I think Amazon got a fine from the regulator of over 700 million euros for using data they were using data for their predictive models that actually they hadn't received consent from their customers to use it for that purpose. And so they received a fine because they couldn't provide evidence that they'd actually got consent to use the data for that purpose. So I think working with data governance team can ensure that the controls and tags are in place to ensure that the data you're looking at is data that you're allowed to use and for whichever purpose that you're looking to use it for. So safeguarding your data and ensuring that sensitive data, so whether that's sensitive of customers, so from a privacy, PII, kind of personally identifiable information perspective, that you've got views on your customers of particularly sensitive dimensions or sensitive information about their character, or if it's confidential information about your organization, like trade secrets or confidential IP. Both of those need to be handled appropriately to ensure that you're not exposing your organization to risk. And data ethics, this is something that's coming up a lot more recently. So promoting ethical data handling practices, helping to avoid biases, and ensuring that decisions align with ethical standards, ensuring fairness, transparency, privacy, and accountability in data-related activities. There was a great talk on this earlier today, actually, upstairs, the team from BSI talking about data ethics. So there are more frameworks and views coming out here. I think one of the key areas is transparency. Some of the models being able to show what is the input to this model, how is this outcome, how is this analysis coming about, how has this decision been made? And some organizations and teams are struggling with that because they don't have the appropriate structures in place to enable reporting or enable a view on how a decision has been made. So that's kind of an overview of some of the areas where I think data governance can really assist data scientists and their work and address some of the challenges that I shared earlier. How does it operate? So I think it's all good and well, like those things are all very nice, but how can we actually implement this in practice? There are lots of different frameworks and approaches. This is just one view, but I like to think about this along the dimensions of kind of people, process, and technology. How can we implement and mature data governance? So in people, making sure that we've got so essentially, people are going to drive our governance initiatives and enforce policies. The kind of thing that fall in the people pillar include appropriate roles and responsibilities. So things like data stewards, caretakers for your data, data owners, having those individuals identified. Some organizations already have these types of people, but they're just not formally named as stewards or owners, and often this work is falling on kind of at the edge of the desk of the responsibilities they're already undertaking. So I think there's something about data governance making this more formal and making the great work that is being done by individuals across organizations visible. So putting in and allocating roles and responsibilities for data and data metrics like data quality. Data governance forums. So I think these are putting forums in place that enable data decisions to be made, appropriate data decisions to be made. So bringing together key stakeholders who are responsible for data or impacted by it from across the organization, and making sure that some of these decisions that need to be made around choices of data are made in an open forum and are transparent. And so different organizations choose to have different structures for data governance committees, but I think it's important to have that forum where these debates and discussions can take place. And culture, comms, and training for data users. So this is something I'll touch on in a bit as well. I see data governance implementations as really a change management program. These aren't like software implementations. It's not something that can be just done in a big bang, a one and done. These things take time. We're looking to change people's behavior around how they use data. And often, people can be quite protective around that. I've had something that's very common is where someone in a team is the person who is effectively a single point of failure. But they feel threatened actually by data governance because if we can it's almost taking away their power because we actually document their knowledge and make it available to everyone. So that can be quite a tough sell, but it's critical if we can actually persuade those individuals that actually this empowers them and their team and means that instead of having to answer the same question every single week, their knowledge is being used for the greater good of the organization, it means that their time and effort is freed up to do perhaps more value-adding tasks. But I see it very much as a change management element. A lot of my work is actually looking to develop those change management programs that work on trying to change people's behavior rather than the tooling implementations, which are often the more straightforward part of data governance. The hard part is getting the people to change and to realize the value of what the point of all this is. Processes, so processes defining rules, workflows for data handling. So what are the appropriate ways of handling and using data that are aligned to our organization's strategy and our organization's risk appetite? So the type of thing we see here is documented policies, standards, and procedures, making sure that we're standardizing and formalizing operations across organizations. So for things like data classification, data access, which I mentioned, making sure that's formalized and documented, data quality and approaches to data quality rules and thresholds, data security, etc. And technology. So technology provides the infrastructure to scale and automate governance. This is one of the areas where I said earlier where I think data science can really help data governance. I think traditionally a lot of data governance efforts have failed just because they're too manual, and we can allocate a data steward who needs to write a description for all of the data assets, and they simply burn out. The velocity of data assets coming in every single day, it's simply impossible for this work to be done manually. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in this area where we can use generative AI to generate definitions of data assets, which can then be reviewed by data stewards. That's an exciting area. But generally, there are a lot of tools that can assist with scaling and automating governance. And I think automating governance is key. If we're relying on some of this work to be done manually, it just won't be done. I think that's probably why data governance gets a poor reputation sometimes. They're asking people to go in and write definitions for things, and it's a tough ask when you have thousands and thousands of data elements. So where that can be automated, I think there's a potential to have real impact. And the type of tools that can assist, data catalogs I mentioned, and data lineage I mentioned as well. So they can really help scale data governance across organizations beyond a team or just a small number of use cases. And what I've done here, so this is these are pillars of our data governance framework, but I think it really needs to align up with the corporate strategy. What is a business strategy? Why does this organization exist? What are we trying to drive? And tying data governance to actually driving that value and driving a business's strategy. What I've often seen is that different companies have gone through iterations of failed data governance efforts. Usually the plug is pulled because they can't demonstrate what the point of data governance is. Why does this team exist, and why should they continue to take investment? So making sure that data governance efforts are tied to the value output, a key use case or a key strategic objective of the organization. This year, it's been, every organization in their earnings calls and annual reports has been talking about generative AI. And so that's kind of an easy win for governance. It'd be going in, well, there's no point, you can't even talk about that if your data estate is not even managed. And there's no way you're going to realize any value, and you've just told your investors and your shareholders that you're going to go into this space. So you need to actually start, if you're serious about this, then you're going to need to invest in data management. And those areas are actually somewhere where we can identify exciting and valuable use cases that data governance can assist with, and then demonstrate the value that this work brings. And then I think that's the easiest approach to implementing, is starting small or starting with a valuable use case, demonstrating the value, and then expanding from there. I don't think this is a kind of approach you can do trying to implement it across an organization all at once. So that's how I kind of think about data governance and how I see it operating. What can you do next? So here I was kind of thinking about what are the actionable next steps if you're looking to improve data governance in your organization or in your team. So I think it can vary because different organizations have different kind of stages there are different stages in their data governance journey, different levels of data governance maturity. Some organizations just say they're simply too small. So if you're a startup and you've got a very small team, why would you invest separately in a data governance team or a data governance function? I think there's an opportunity there to just to make sure that at least data governance thinking is baked in, and so that you don't build up data debt, which is kind of similar to if you kind of don't clean up after yourself and the mess just builds up. I think being able to establish good data governance practices at the outset is going to be hugely valuable. But the other areas, in terms of what to do next, I think start with the right people. I think this is what I mentioned earlier around identifying stewards and a governance committee. I think this is engaging with key data stakeholders in your organization, if that's CDO or data and analytics leaders, data science teams, making sure that these stakeholders are engaged and are at least aware of good data governance practices and brought in to understand. I think a lot of it's around education and understanding the reason for and the value of good data governance. Treating data governance as a journey. This is quite common because some of the organizations I've been into treat it more as a project, and they think that they can get data governance done in 3 or 4 months and then that's the job done. Whereas actually I think this work never ends. I think it's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time task, but the important thing is to get started and to appreciate that it's a journey and will evolve. And that also links to taking an agile, iterative approach. This was what I was saying around rather than trying to implement good data governance across the whole data estate, focusing on a valuable use case and building out from there. I think that is the most effective way of scaling effective data governance and demonstrating its value is to start with a visible use case, demonstrate value of that use case, and then extend to other use cases. Tracking metrics is important in order to demonstrate the value of data governance. This is a big one because I think, as I mentioned, often the plug gets pulled because data governance teams can't demonstrate what value they've driven. And so being able to track metrics, measuring the progress that's being made, whether that's number of users in a data catalog, whether that's assets that are being defined, whether that's time that's being saved by data science teams, so the time that otherwise they would have to spend searching for data assets. In fact, there's something you could actually do an A/B test and have one team that has access to a data catalog and good data governance and demonstrate how much time they're saving compared with the team that does not have that. But I think tracking metrics and measuring is very important. And then communication. This is a change program. I think there need to be clear communication channels, transparency and visibility, that the data governance efforts that are taking place and their value are communicated and made known across organizations. So as I mentioned, I'm from Cervello, so we're a data and digital consultancy. So this is just an overview of the work that we do. But yeah, that's the end of my kind of overview of data governance, why I think it's important, and why I think data governance is a data scientist's best friend. So I got through that very quickly. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take questions, and also very happy to connect. Like if you have anything that you'd like to connect on, or you'd like to discuss data governance, or talk about frameworks or approaches, very happy to connect, and I'll be around after the session as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. That was super interesting. I'm sure many more of us found it interesting. Does anyone have a question? You can just put your hand up.
Oh, hi there. It's very, very interesting. What I'm curious about is if you're a data scientist, say, and chiefly concerned with modeling, but then get increasingly exposed to strategic issues around data acquisition and data curation. So data governance becomes an obvious thing, but there's not necessarily any formal training or any experience. What's a good place to start with resources that could teach you the fundamentals, expose you to the specifics of what tools you should maybe think about, the concepts, the frameworks, all the things to help you go from realizing the data governance's importance to actually beginning that journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. Around how, because a lot of the work I do is actually educating teams on what data governance is. A lot of this, and I'm trying to think what kind of, it's tricky. I think some of the tools have very good education programs. So I know Elation has Elation University, Calibra has I'm trying to remember what it's called, but some of these tools actually have data governance training programs which provide kind of an overview of data governance and work towards data governance certifications. In terms of like, so your question's around how would one learn about this, is that right? Yeah. So I think there are a couple of industry standards that's probably good to get familiar with. One is DAMA, D-A-M-A. They publish something called the DMBOK, you might be familiar with, Data Management Book of Knowledge. It's about this thick, so I wouldn't recommend reading all of it, but it's a good thing. They have a framework for data governance that it's good to be familiar with. And they also do provide a certification path as well. So that's a good kind of first step. DCAM, I think also, so DCAM also provide data governance training. There are also, there are quite a few good people you can follow. I actually learn a lot on LinkedIn. There are a lot of great people who post and write about data governance. If you connect with me, actually, I can send some things, send some links over if you're interested. But it'd be good to know the kind of specific areas, and then I can share. I'd be happy to share some content.
I just have maybe two questions.
Sure.
You spoke about the tools and also about the metrics. So I was wondering, based on your experience working with other companies in the industry, what are the most popular tools for, let's say, data cataloging that you commonly see? And in terms of KPIs and metrics, again, what is like the most common that you normally see, and what tends to work most of the times?
Sure, thank you. So with regards to tools, it often varies with the organization which tool they choose based on their particular requirements. In terms of data catalog, in this year, most popular data catalogs I've seen have been Elation, Atlan, Atacama, tools like that. I think in the data governance space, Calibra has been a very popular tool. But with the organizations I've worked with, they've sometimes worked with different tools because they are more aligned to their organizational requirements. So, for example, in financial services or pharmaceuticals, heavily regulated industries, so they might choose a slightly different type of tool that can integrate with particular data security tools that they're using. Other less regulated industries might take a different approach because of cost or users or even size of their organization. But yeah, that's kind of those are the popular tools I've seen in the data catalog space. Your second question was around metrics, is that right? How would you measure data governance? So I think the most powerful metric would be if you could tie it to a pound sign. What is the value this is driving? But in terms of how that might break down, I think percentage of users engaging with a data governance tool. Data quality, there are a lot of metrics around measuring validity of a data set. Is that improving based on data governance efforts? Accuracy, completeness. So there are kind of data quality metrics. In terms of data governance, I'm also thinking things like usage. Time saved is a good one, because I guess that's the argument that your catalog can save the time of your data science teams. If it's gone from several days to several minutes, then that time converts directly to a cost saving. So that there's also an opportunity. I think that's a common kind of efficiency metric that I've seen. There are some others around even population of your data catalog, right? How much of your data estate is defined? How complete is our glossary? Metrics like that. But it'll be aligned to what is the objective of your data governance function? How is that tied to your organizational strategy? That's the best way to define your metric, especially if you can roll it all the way up. Even to the CEO, like one of the organizations I've worked with, the metric for data quality rolls all the way up to the CEO, so they're directly responsible for that percentage, and that's measured around this kind of accuracy, timeliness, validity of the data. That goes all the way to the tops, and so there's visibility of that, and therefore there's also support for it, because then their performance is also measured on the basis of data quality.
Thank you, Deep. It was a great presentation today.
Thank you.
My question is, you mentioned change management and influencing behaviors being one of the key challenges of the work that you do. Have you found any particular techniques that have worked particularly well in changing behaviors?
most effective one has been listening, letting people vent. People have often had very bad experiences with data governance. They've had to work with challenging personalities, and they like to talk about it. So often, when I've come into this program, the first few weeks is interviews and workshops, getting people to, especially with members of the Data Governance Committee or any working groups. What's often happened is this type of thing has been implemented and people stop showing up. So we've got a committee in place. We invited a bunch of business stakeholders. A few months in, they stopped coming. So it's interesting to know why. Why did you stop coming? Or what did you expect from this forum? What are the challenges? What are the pain points and data challenges that your team are facing? And how can we help with that? Like, is it actually like you guys can't find data assets? Is it that you don't understand it? Is it actually everything's fine, so you don't see the point of it? I think that's the first point, is actually understanding what the issue is, because I think what's often happened in the organizations where I've seen this has failed, it's often because data governance has been quite kind of command and control. These are the rules and you should follow them. This is the policy and you should read it and implement it for your team. But if it's not adding any value, what's the point? Like these teams are still functioning and operating and able to kind of conduct their business operations. So there's no reason for them to change unless we can understand what value can we bring and what is a pain point and challenge they're experiencing. So I think that's how I usually start, is with that kind of assessment, interviews, listening, because people have had bad experiences with this and they like to talk about it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you.
So we're sort of on our data governance journey at the moment. I think maybe one of the tools has been rolled out a bit too quickly, like you say, and so it's been enlightening sort of listening to what you've had to say. I think one of the big issues that we've got is many different parts of the business have different sort of data requirements and regulation. You've got the bits, sort of regulated by the FCA, and they've got different requirements. You've got some bits dealing with personal data. You've got the marketing team who don't really have many. So it's kind of, how do you go about so the data quality metrics that you said earlier, how do you go about setting benchmarks for them?
It's a good question. I think because it's very common with global organizations where they have localized regulations that they need to evidence. And I think it's taking an approach that is not fully centralized. So if it's with data quality metrics, maybe it's probably a case of making sure that there's some level of federation. Yeah. But as long as that's visibility and transparent, so it's not happening in a vacuum and no one can see what is that federation, how is this being split up. I think it's probably I would probably take an approach of looking at each of those regions and keeping them separate in turn for their in terms of their data quality reporting. What I've seen some teams try to do is to centralize everything, and then that just causes a lot of pain, because then there are regions saying, well, this isn't relevant to us. In fact, it's happening now with one of the organizations I'm working with. Is the regional teams are saying the global team is telling us we have to satisfy this reporting, but it's completely irrelevant for us. We've already got 100 things to do in our backlog. So why on earth would we fulfill this global standard? So I think it's making sure that it's almost taking an approach that satisfies the minimum global standard and then as much of the maximum of the regional standards. Does that help? I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
Is that
definitely.
okay? Cool, great.
I think we've sort of had an equivalent from before, but it's sort of, like you say, it didn't really fulfill the standards that it needed to. We end up talking about, SLAs and things that weren't really too relevant to the analytics team.
Right.
We're sort of two-step removed, so you've got sort of different levels of seniority, different parts of the analytics process, and then also sort of different segmentation. So trying to figure out the federated system is a complicated one, but yeah, the example of different geographies is something I'll look into.
Cool, great, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions before we round off?
Thank you. I'm looking for a holy grail here. Do you have any tips or smooth ways to, when a business is acquiring new businesses and incorporating their data so that it's all queryable as one whole, on a sort of system, or any guidelines on a system to make that as smooth as possible?
A holy grail. That's tricky. Because we're working on a lot of projects of either acquisitions or demergers, and those things take a long time, and they're I don't want to say they're painful, but they're certainly not easy. I think a holy grail would be making sure the data is catalogued as a first step. Especially if you've got kind of a spin out or a demerger, like you need to know what in your data estate actually needs to stay as part of a central entity and what would need to be spun out. I've worked with some companies on that, but you have to start with an inventory and need to make sure you understand. And sometimes that isn't a given. A lot of organizations don't have that inventory. So I think that's a pretty critical first step. Holy Grail, if you find one, let me know, because I don't. It's a great question, but unfortunately, I don't think. I haven't come across anything that's makes this easy.
Are those all the questions that we have? Yes? Okay, well, perfect.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Well, that brings us to the end of the sessions in this room. So thank you so much, everyone, for just coming today to the DSF Festival. And a huge thank you to our speakers, our volunteers, our sponsors, and obviously our marvelous AV team. Can we give them all a round of applause? So we have the DSF competition winners who will be announced upstairs in the control room just now. There will also be networking between 5 and 6 p.m. in the space bar. And if you had fun today, did everyone have fun today? Learn something? Well, you know, the energy is low, but it's okay, because I know it's the end of the day, it's okay. But if you did have a good time, be sure to sign up for May Day 2024, which is happening on the 18th of May. But guys, thank you so much and have a brilliant rest of your day.